Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on, well, a bit of a linguistic adventure, actually. It's one that promises to make you not just well-informed, but, truly articulate. We've taken a stack of sources, a rather unique one today, excerpts from a dictionary of synonyms and antonyms, and our mission is to unpack the subtle yet powerful distinctions between words we often use interchangeably. Think about it. How often do we just grab for the nearest word when actually a more precise one exists? One that's just waiting to perfectly capture our meaning. This isn't just about expanding your vocabulary, though that's part of it. It's really about sharpening your clarity, enhancing your impact, and truly understanding the nuanced world around us, one perfectly chosen word at a time. Okay, let's unpack this.
Indeed. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how these seemingly similar words we often toss around as if they mean the same thing. They actually carry entirely different weights, different implications, and even, different emotional resonances. If we connect this to the bigger picture, mastering these subtle nuances can fundamentally transform your communication. It really can. It allows you to convey precise thoughts, avoid misunderstandings, and really grasp the full, intricate meaning of what you read and hear. And this raises an important question for all of us, doesn't it? How much clarity, how much impact are we actually sacrificing by not appreciating these subtle differences? We'll dive deep into that today.
Okay, let's start then. Let's dive into a group of words that all describe something unpleasing. A kind of spectrum of aversion, you could say. We all intuitively know ugly, right? That's the common one. But our sources lay out a really compelling case for why words like hideous, ill-favored, and unsightly aren't just mere synonyms. They each paint a very specific, carefully delineated picture.
Exactly. This is truly where precision begins. While ugly is our foundational starting point, it's remarkably broad, almost an umbrella term, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
The dictionary defines ugly as neither pleasing nor beautiful, especially to the eye. That's the core. But its scope stretches far beyond just visual aesthetics. Ugly can apply not only to what's not pleasing to the eye, but to what offends, well, any of our senses, like an ugly sound or an ugly smell. And even more profoundly, it can give rise to deeper negative reactions, things like repulsion, dread, or even moral distaste in the mind.
Okay, so it's not just about looks.
Not at all. Think about the example our source provides. A street of small, drab, ugly houses. Now here, ugly certainly captures the general unpleasing visual, but it also hints at something broader, doesn't it? A sense of drabness, maybe squalor, or even despair associated with the whole environment.
Right, it paints a whole atmosphere.
Exactly. It's about the total experience of offense or revulsion, not just a quick visual assessment. And importantly, it can describe not just physical appearance, but also abstract concepts, things like character or circumstances.
Like an ugly truth.
Precisely. An ugly truth is profoundly unpleasant, perhaps morally objectionable. Or think of an ugly mood, which creates this atmosphere of contention or discomfort. In those cases, the word speaks to something fundamentally offensive or disagreeable.
And its antonym is just beautiful.
Fittingly, yes, beautiful, encompassing a similarly broad range of positive attributes and experiences.
Okay, so ugly is the broad baseline. What about hideous? That sounds much stronger.
Oh, much stronger. Hideous stresses a much more intense, visceral, and personal reaction. It specifically implies inducing horror or loathing. You use it when something is perceived as extremely ugly, whether that's externally or internally.
So the key is the feeling it causes in the person seeing it.
Yes, exactly. The crucial distinction here is the profound, often almost physical, emotional response it induces in the observer. It's not just not beautiful. It's deeply disturbing, profoundly shocking. It often evokes a sense of revulsion that's, well, hard to shake.
Can you give an example?
Our source gives a powerful one. A hurricane that caused hideous destruction. This isn't just bad destruction, it's destruction so vast, so devastating, that it evokes actual horror and loathing in those who witness it. It suggests something truly appalling. It's often associated with widespread devastation or extreme moral depravity, maybe something monstrous. It really speaks to a level of profound ugliness that goes way beyond simple dislike.
And the opposite of that.
The antonym for hideous is lovely, suggesting something that delights and inspires affection, the polar opposite of horror and loathing.
Okay, got it. So ugly is broad offense, hideous is horror-inducing. What about ill-favored?
Yeah.
That one sounds a bit old-fashioned.
It does have a slightly older feel, but it's very specific and often less emotionally charged than hideous. It applies especially to personal appearance and implies ugliness solely to the sense of sight. crucially without necessarily suggesting a resulting distaste or dread in the observer.
Ah, so it's purely visual and doesn't necessarily make you feel disgusted or afraid.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The key here is the lack of that strong negative emotional response beyond just the visual assessment. Someone might be described as ill-favored if they have, say, unfortunate or unconventional physical features, maybe through no fault of their own, but their appearance doesn't provoke repulsion or horror like hideous would.
Okay.
The dictionary gives the rather poignant example. Self-conscious about his ill-favored features. This paints a picture of someone aware their looks aren't conventionally attractive, maybe leading to personal discomfort, but it doesn't suggest they're monstrous or terrifying to others. It's about being unattractive in a purely visual sense.
And its antonyms.
Well-favored and fair, both indicating a pleasing appearance.
Right. Okay, last one in this group. Unsightly. Where does that fit?
Unsightly. This term is particularly likely to refer to a material thing, an object, a building, a landscape feature on which the eye dwells with no pleasure, and it explicitly connotes a suggestion of distaste.
So, like, ill-favored, it's mainly visual, but for things, not people.
Exactly. Similar focus on sight, but almost exclusively tied to inanimate objects, structures, or landscapes. It describes something that mars a view or environment, causing a kind of mild displeasure or annoyance rather than outright horror or deep repulsion. It's the visual equivalent of a minor blemish or an eyesore.
Makes sense, like a messy construction site.
Perfect example. Or the one from our source. A dump that sat as an unsightly blot on the landscape. It's a visual disruption, a blemish on the scenery. It's not terrifying or morally repugnant. It's about what offends the aesthetic sense of a particular scene or place.
And its opposite.
Sightly, indicating something pleasing to the eye, especially as part of a landscape or view.
So what does this all mean for our everyday communication? It feels like it's really not just about finding a word.
Absolutely not. It's about finding the exact word that orchestrates the listener's emotional response and sharpens the picture you're painting. Understanding these subtle distinctions in words describing something unpleasing reveals how deeply our language shapes not just descriptions, but also perception and, well, visceral reaction.
Yeah, it allows you to convey everything from a mild visual annoyance, something just unsightly, all the way to profound horror with hideous, using pinpoint accuracy. That makes your communication far more impactful.
Couldn't agree more.
That's a fantastic breakdown. Yeah. Really shows how precise we can be even when talking about something broadly unpleasant. Now, let's shift our focus inward. Let's look at the equally intricate landscape of our minds. Our sources illuminate these subtle but crucial differences when we navigate the realms of not believing something, or maybe grappling with uncertainty. It's truly a spectrum of conviction, isn't it? And understanding it can transform how we perceive truth itself and interact with information.
Oh, this area is particularly rich, I find. These words describe our internal processing of information, our assessment of truth, and the very nature of trust. Let's begin by dissecting the first trio: unbelief, disbelief, and incredulity. They're frequently confused, I think, yet each points to a distinct mental posture.
Okay, let's start with unbelief.
Right. So when we talk about unbelief, we're stressing the absence of belief, especially regarding something that's, above or beyond one's direct experience or maybe immediate capacity to process. So crucially, this isn't an act of rejection. It's more of a passive state of not having belief formed yet.
Like your mind just hasn't accepted it.
Exactly. It's a lack of mental acceptance, often because a concept is too abstract, maybe too foreign, or just too immense for one's current frame of reference. Our source gives the example: received news of the disaster with an attitude of unbelief. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they doubted the facts of the disaster, but rather that their mind hadn't quite processed or accepted the shocking reality. It's a state of mental blankness, almost a protective mechanism, where belief simply hasn't yet formed or integrated.
Okay, so its opposite is just belief.
Its true opposite, quite fittingly, is belief itself, pure and simple acceptance.
Right, so how is disbelief different then? It sounds similar.
It does sound similar, but it's quite distinct. Disbelief, in stark contrast to unbelief, implies a positive rejection of something stated or advanced. This is an active, conscious stance.
Ah, so it's not passive like unbelief.
Not at all. Unlike unbelief, which is that passive void, disbelief involves an active mental process. You're refuting or dismissing a claim. You've considered the proposition, you've evaluated it, and you actively decide it's not true, or at least highly improbable.
You've made a judgment.
Yes. The dictionary clarifies this with: regarded his explanation with disbelief. Here, the person heard the explanation, processed it, and actively chose not to accept it. It's a conscious mental act of refutation, often stemming from evidence, prior knowledge, or maybe a logical assessment that contradicts the claim.
And its antonym is also belief.
Yes, but here it emphasizes the direct active opposition to it. You believe instead of disbelieving.
Okay, that makes sense. Unbelief is passive absence. Disbelief is active rejection. What about the third one? Incredulity.
Incredulity suggests a disposition or a tendency to refuse belief or acceptance. It often describes a characteristic mental reaction, sometimes just a momentary one, to something extraordinary.
So it's more like a personality trait or a temporary state of being unable to believe.
It can be either, yes. This term implies a habitual or momentary difficulty in accepting something as true, often because it's just so surprising, so extraordinary, or so far-fetched that it challenges your understanding of reality. It's not just a lack of belief or an active rejection, but often a sense of astonishment or wonder alongside the non-acceptance.
Like you're amazed and can't quite process it.
Exactly. You hear something truly astounding, something that just defies all your expectations, and your immediate characteristic reaction is this inability to fully accept its truth. The source's example is illustrative. Greeted her announcement with incredulity. Her announcement was so surprising, so beyond the realm of normal expectation, that the immediate reaction was this disbelieving astonishment.
Right, and the opposite of that tendency.
Credulity, which means a readiness or willingness to believe, often on slight or uncertain evidence, almost too ready to believe.
That's a brilliant breakdown of unbelief, disbelief, and incredulity. I could instantly think of situations where confusing those two could lead to, well, a massive misunderstanding in a personal relationship or even a professional context.
Oh, absolutely. It's a common trap.
Are there common pitfalls you see people fall into when trying to distinguish these in everyday conversation?
Definitely. I think often we label someone as disbelieving something when they're actually in a state of unbelief. They simply lack the framework, maybe sufficient information or the prior experience to process or fully accept it.
Especially with complex ideas.
Particularly with complex or abstract ideas, yes. Unbelief is almost a default state until sufficient evidence or context is provided. You might unbelieve in, say, a theoretical concept like quantum entanglement if you lack the scientific background. You don't actively disbelieve it, you just haven't reached belief. Incredulity, too, is often misread. It's not necessarily a reasoned rejection of facts, but that deeply human, almost involuntary reaction to something truly astonishing. Imagine witnessing something that defies all your expectations. Your initial response might be pure incredulity, not necessarily a reasoned disbelief that it didn't happen, but just a genuine difficulty in processing its reality.
Recognizing these differences helps us approach conversations with more empathy and precision, doesn't it?
Immensely. Now, let's turn to the broader spectrum of lack of sureness. This ranges from just a vague uncertainty all the way to active distrust. Here we have uncertainty, doubt, dubiety, skepticism, suspicion, and mistrust. Quite a list.
Okay, let's start with the most basic, uncertainty.
Right. Uncertainty stresses just a general lack of certitude. It can range widely in scope. It's simply not being sure. This is the broadest and probably the most neutral term for not having a firm conclusion. It can be a vague feeling or a very specific one without necessarily implying any negative judgment or an active internal struggle.
Yeah, they don't know for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's merely a state of not having a firm conclusion or clear knowledge. The source provides a very common scenario: general uncertainty about the program's future. This suggests an open question, an unresolved status. It doesn't imply malice or deep conflict, just a lack of definitive information.
And its antonym is certainty. Simple enough.
Simple enough. Now, doubt suggests both uncertainty and an inability to make a decision. It strongly implies wavering.
Okay, so doubt involves struggle.
Yes, this is a more active and often more distressing state than mere uncertainty. It's frequently accompanied by mental struggle, maybe internal conflict or indecision. You're grappling internally with conflicting ideas or possibilities. It often has a personal, introspective quality, as seen in the very relatable example given. Plagued by doubts about his upcoming marriage. This isn't just not being sure, it's an internal conflict that makes decision-making difficult and can cause significant distress.
And its antonyms reflect that struggle.
They do. Certitude and confidence, both speaking to a firm belief or assurance.
Right. Now, dubiety. That's not a word you hear every day.
No, it's more formal. Dubiety stresses a lack of sureness that leads to a wavering between conclusions. It implies a critical need for clarity and resolution, often in a more formal or intellectual context.
So it's like doubt, but maybe more serious or intellectual.
In a way, yes. While similar to doubt, dubiety highlights a state of intellectual or moral wavering where clear decision-making or conviction is impaired. It implies a more pressing need for resolution than simple doubt might, often in situations where a clear stance is required. The source emphasizes its importance in leadership. In times of crisis, a leader must be free of all dubiety. This speaks to the absolute necessity for unwavering clarity and decisive action in critical moments, highlighting how dubiety would fundamentally hinder that.
And its antonym points to resolution.
Exactly. Decision indicating a settled conclusion.
Okay. Next up, skepticism. This one feels common.
Very common and important. Skepticism implies a habitual state of mind or a customary reaction characterized by unwillingness to believe without conclusive evidence.
So it's a default stance of questioning.
Precisely. It's a default posture of questioning and requiring proof, often rooted in an intellectual approach. It's a critical approach to information, not necessarily an emotional one, though it can certainly lead to emotional responses. And, a healthy skepticism is often seen as a virtue, right? A safeguard against baseless claims, promoting rigorous inquiry.
Definitely.
The example demonstrates this intellectual stance. Quote, an economic forecast that was met with skepticism, that wasn't immediately believed, it was questioned, scrutinized, and required further conclusive proof before acceptance.
And the opposite is being too easily convinced.
Right. Its antonym is gullibility, a readiness to be easily deceived.
Okay, now suspicion. This feels more negative, more gut level.
It often is. Suspicion stresses a lack of faith in the truth, reality, fairness, or reliability of something or someone. This term suggests a negative prejudgment, an intuitive inkling or gut feeling that something is amiss or untrustworthy. It's often less about concrete evidence and more about an intuitive sense or a vague unease that something is wrong.
Like a bad feeling about someone.
Exactly. The source illustrates this immediate sense of caution. Viewed the new neighbors with suspicion. There isn't concrete proof of wrongdoing, perhaps, but there's a strong intuitive feeling of distrust or apprehension. It's often a precursor to deeper investigation or confirmed mistrust.
Which leads us to mistrust.
It often does. Mistrust implies a genuine doubt based upon suspicion. It's a more established, deeper, and often more settled lack of trust. Mistrust implies that previous suspicions have maybe accumulated or been reinforced by observations, or have led to a more generalized lack of confidence. It often arises from a perceived history of unreliability, whether personal or generalized.
So it's suspicion solidified.
That's a good way to put it. The example given, had a great mistrust of all doctors, suggests a deeply ingrained lack of confidence. It likely stems from past negative experiences, maybe anecdotal evidence, or just a general outlook, rather than just a fleeting suspicion about one doctor. It indicates a more profound and sustained lack of faith.
And its antonyms.
Assurance and trust, highlighting the spectrum from settled doubt to firm confidence.
Wow. Here's where it gets really interesting. I mean, these aren't just synonyms at all. They're emotional and intellectual pathways. Knowing the difference empowers you to accurately describe your own feelings and, just as importantly, to better understand others' reactions.
Absolutely.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Are you just uncertain about a choice, or do you have deep doubts that are paralyzing you, maybe leading to sleepless nights? Are you simply lacking belief in something theoretical, or do you actively and consciously disbelieve a specific claim someone made because it just violates your understanding of reality?
Each word tells such a richer story about the state of mind. It allows for profound precision in both self-awareness and, interpersonal understanding.
That's a genuinely illuminating look into how we process conviction and uncertainty. Really powerful stuff. Now let's pivot. Let's look at expressions of thoughts and feelings, specifically focusing on different manifestations of freedom. We often talk broadly about freedom, but how do we describe the way that freedom manifests? From casual abandon to natural authenticity, our sources give us some great options: unconstraint, abandon, and spontaneity.
Yes, these terms beautifully describe different facets of unrestrained expression. They move from a general lack of inhibition to a sudden, genuine outpouring of feeling. Each paints a really unique picture of how freedom from inhibition plays out.
Okay, let's start with unconstraint.
Right. Unconstraint expresses the fact of freely yielding to impulse. The dictionary notes it can replace either abandon or spontaneity, though it often carries a less positive or maybe just a more neutral implication. This is the most general term. It simply indicates a lack of limits, restrictions, or internal checks. It's a neutral descriptor for living or acting without restraint, or for actions that are simply free from any imposed restrictions, whether they're internal or external.
So, just
Yeah.
freedom from rules.
Pretty much. Our source provides the example: lived a life of complete unconstraint. This suggests a life free from typical rules, societal expectations, or maybe self-imposed inhibitions, but it doesn't necessarily carry a strong positive or negative judgment on that freedom. It just is.
And its opposite is constraint. Makes sense.
Exactly. Now, abandon. This one feels different.
Yeah, it sounds more...
It is. Abandon may add a powerful implication of loss of self-control, or the absence or impotence of any check on full, free, or natural expression of feeling. This term often implies a powerful, overwhelming release. You're completely immersed in the moment or emotion, sometimes even with a slightly negative connotation of, say, recklessness or losing oneself in the moment.
like letting go completely.
Completely. It suggests a complete giving over to emotion or impulse where boundaries dissolve and inhibition is just cast aside. The source gives two vivid examples that illustrate this immersive release. Weep with abandon, which paints a picture of uncontrolled, overwhelming grief or emotion, a complete surrender to tears,
Right.
and ate with abandon the whole time we're on vacation, suggesting a complete lack of dietary restraint or self-consciousness, a full indulgence in pleasure.
Okay, total letting go.
Yeah.
And its antonym.
Self-restraint, emphasizing control and discipline.
Right. Okay, last one here. Spontaneity. This usually feels positive, doesn't it?
It often does, yes. Spontaneity suggests an unstudied naturalness and may connote freshness, lack of deliberation, or obedience to the impulse of the moment. Spontaneity is often seen as a highly positive quality. It implies authenticity, genuineness, and a refreshing lack of premeditation or artificiality.
So it's natural, not planned.
Exactly. It's about acting genuinely on the spur of the moment, often with a fresh, charming, or invigorating quality that feels natural and unforced. It's an immediate, often delightful response to a situation. The dictionary offers a wonderful illustration, a welcome full of warm spontaneity. This implies a genuine, heartfelt, immediate warmth. It's not something planned, forced, or rehearsed, which makes it all the more pleasant and authentic.
And it doesn't have that potential recklessness of abandoned.
Generally not. Unlike abandon, which can verge on recklessness, spontaneity usually implies a more endearing, natural flow.
So whether you're describing someone acting without inhibition in a general sense, unconstrained, or losing themselves completely in an emotion, abandon, or simply embracing a genuine spur-of-the-moment decision, spontaneity, the right word reveals so much about the quality and impact of that freedom. It moves beyond just saying freedom to describing the character of that liberation. That really enriches your portrayal immensely.
It absolutely does.
That's fascinating how each word captures a different flavor of uninhibited expression. Really useful. Now let's transition to how our minds absorb new information. When we learn something new, what's actually happening in our cognitive process? Our sources highlight different stages or depths of knowing, beautifully captured by understand, comprehend, and appreciate. It feels like a progression, almost a journey of knowledge.
It really is a progression. This sequence truly illustrates the profound journey from simply grasping facts to truly internalizing their significance and value. It's a powerful framework for thinking about learning itself.
Let's start with the most basic. Understand.
Okay. Understand may stress the foundational fact of having attained a mental grasp of something. This is the initial, most basic stage of knowing. It's about getting the basic meaning, following instructions, or knowing what something is on a surface level. It's foundational, a necessary first step.
Like just getting the instructions.
Exactly. The source provides the example, understood the instructions. This indicates a basic level of mental processing where the meaning is grasped sufficiently to act upon it. You can follow the directions, you can maybe parrot back the definition, even if you don't fully grasp the underlying principles or broader implications.
It's about coherence, making sense of the immediate information.
Precisely. Now, comprehend stresses the mental process of arriving at a result, implying a more thorough or complete mental grasp.
So it's deeper than just understanding.
Significantly deeper. This goes beyond mere understanding to encompass the entire process, the intricate interconnections, the full scope of a concept. It suggests a deeper level of analytical processing, integration, and holistic assimilation. You don't just know what it is, you grasp how it works, why it works, and its various components and their relationships.
Seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. The source's example is clear. Fail to comprehend the entire process. This suggests not just missing a step or misinterpreting a detail, but failing to grasp the holistic, interconnected nature of the whole operation, missing the big picture despite maybe knowing some individual pieces.
It's about grasping the why and how beyond the simple what.
Perfectly put. Then there's appreciate.
This one feels different again, not just intellectual.
Right. Appreciate implies a just estimation of a thing's value. It moves beyond mere intellectual grasp to an emotional or evaluative understanding. It's not just knowing about something or even grasping its intricacies. It's recognizing its significance, its inherent worth, or its profound impact. It involves valuing something, understanding its importance in a broader context, and perhaps even feeling a sense of gratitude, respect, or profound insight for it.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, think about something like you might appreciate the importance of early diagnosis. You don't just understand what early diagnosis is or comprehend the medical processes involved. You recognize its profound value, its critical role, and its positive impact on patient outcomes. It's a deeper, more profound form of knowing that integrates intellectual understanding with a sense of value and significance.
Wow. This isn't just about vocabulary, then. It's practically a blueprint for learning, for gaining tree mastery.
It really is.
You first understand the basic facts, then you comprehend the intricate connections and the full scope, and finally, you truly appreciate the depth and value of what you've learned. It's a progression from basic grasp to profound insight and, maybe, lasting wisdom. Recognizing this pathway can make you a more intentional and effective learner.
I absolutely agree. It's a very useful framework.
That's a powerful framework for intellectual growth, really useful. Now, moving from internal understanding to external structures, how do we describe different ways that individuals or maybe elements combine to form a whole? Our sources unpack 4 powerful words that might seem similar, but each delineate distinct qualities of cohesion: unity, solidarity, integrity, and union.
Yes, these terms describe distinct qualities of cohesion. Each has unique implications for how a whole functions, how it's perceived, and how its parts relate. Understanding these helps us describe everything from, say, architectural design to social movements.
Okay, first up, unity.
Unity implies oneness, especially of what is varied and diverse in its elements or parts. This emphasizes that despite differences, all components contribute to a single, harmonious, and coherent entity. It's about different parts, perhaps very distinct ones, working together to form a coherent whole, maintaining their distinctiveness while contributing to a unified vision or outcome. Harmony and diversity, basically.
Like a choir singing different parts but creating one sound.
Excellent analogy. Or the source's example from architecture. A multiplicity of styles effectively combine into a unity of architectural design. This highlights how disparate individual elements, like different periods or cultural influences in design, can come together to form a single, harmonious, and aesthetically pleasing whole.
Okay, harmony from diversity. What about solidarity? That feels more human.
It almost exclusively is. Solidarity implies a unity in a group or class that enables it to manifest its strength and exert its influence as one. This term is nearly always used for groups of people. It signifies a shared purpose, mutual support, and a collective determination to act as a single unified force, often in the face of external challenges or to achieve a common goal.
So it's unity with a purpose, for action.
Exactly. It's unity with a clear, active purpose, frequently for collective action, mutual assistance, or resistance. The dictionary gives the powerful example: an ethnic minority with a strong sense of solidarity. This speaks to a deep bond among people that allows them to act powerfully together, supporting each other and pushing for a common cause, often to overcome adversity.
Right. Then there's integrity. This often relates to morals, doesn't it? But here it's about structure.
It can be both, and they're related. In the structural sense, integrity implies unity that indicates exactitude of association and interdependence of the parts and completeness and perfection of the whole. This suggests an inherent soundness, wholeness, or unblemished quality. All parts are perfectly aligned and essential, leading to an unblemished, flawless, or even morally upright state, structurally speaking.
So it's about soundness and perfection.
Yes, and internal consistency. It implies a high standard of composition, where internal consistency and adherence to its core principles are paramount. The source says, a farcical scene that destroys the play's integrity. This means the scene undermines the coherence, completeness, and perhaps even the artistic soundness of the play as a whole. It breaks its essential unity and perfection. It's about being whole and uncorrupted.
Okay. And finally, union.
Union implies a thorough integration and harmonious cooperation of the parts, or the body or organization that results from such a uniting. This term often refers to the act of combining or the resulting entity from that combination. It emphasizes the active process of joining and the cooperative nature of the resulting whole.
Like a marriage or states forming a country.
Exactly. It can be a formal or informal joining, and often implies the creation of something new from the combined parts, a new entity born from the act of coming together. A perfect historical example from our source is given, the union of 13 diverse colonies to form one nation. This describes both the political act of joining and the resulting single cohesive national entity that functions cooperatively.
So next time you see a group working together, whether it's a design team or a community initiative, you should consider, is it unity, where diverse elements simply coexist harmoniously?
Right.
Or solidarity, where they're banded together for a cause showing mutual support? Or integrity, where the whole is perfect and unblemished, true to its core essence? Or even a formal union that best describes their cohesion, signifying a deliberate act of combining. The choice of word conveys distinct, powerful characteristics about the nature of the whole.
Absolutely. Precision matters.
That's incredibly helpful for precision in describing everything from alliances to art. Really good stuff. Now, how precise are we when we talk about groups, categories, or ideas in terms of their scope and generality? Our sources give us distinct ways to define the extent to which something applies, whether it's absolute, broad, or characteristic, universal, general, and generic.
Yes, these words are absolutely crucial for avoiding ambiguity. When you're describing the extent to which something applies, whether it's a rule, a statement, or a concept, misusing them can lead to significant overgeneralizations or, misinterpretations.
Okay, let's start with the biggest one, universal.
Right. Universal implies reference to every single one without exception in the class, category, or genus considered. This is the most absolute and all-encompassing term. It leaves absolutely no room for exceptions.
Every single one. No exceptions.
None whatsoever. It suggests something that applies to all, without qualification, everywhere, or always. There are no exclusions. The dictionary provides a strong example. Declared universal amnesty. This means every single individual, without a single exception, was granted amnesty. It's the highest degree of inclusivity.
And its opposite highlights that.
Exactly. Its antonym, particular, highlights this all-encompassing nature by pointing to something specific and limited.
Okay, universal means all. What about general? That feels less absolute.
It is less absolute. General implies reference to all or nearly all. Or, importantly, when you're talking about things like words, language, ideas, notions, it can suggest a lack of precision.
So it has two main meanings.
Kind of two related uses, yes. Firstly, it can mean most or denote widespread acceptance. It implies something is common or prevailing, but not necessarily absolute or without exceptions. For example, the theory has met general acceptance. This means most people, or a wide range of people, accept it, but there might still be some who don't. It indicates a predominant trend rather than an absolute rule.
Okay, so most or widespread. What's the other meaning?
The second meaning refers to a lack of specific detail, like a broad overview rather than minute specifics. The source illustrates this with, got the general idea.
Ah, right. You didn't get every single detail, every nuance, but you grasped the main concept or outline.
Precisely. It's about a common or prevailing characteristic or a broad summary.
Got it. Universal is all, general is most, or broad. What about generic?
Generic implies reference to every member of a genus and is applicable especially to items such as qualities, characteristics, or likenesses that serve as identifying guides.
So it's about the defining features of a whole category.
Exactly. This word often refers to shared defining qualities that characterize or define a group or type, making it identifiable. It's about the typical or characteristic features that allow something to be categorized, rather than its unique individual traits. Think of a generic brand. It lacks specific branding or a unique name, but it possesses the defining qualities, the essential characteristics of its product type. It's about the class or kind.
Like dogness for dogs.
That's a great way to think about it. The example from our source is clear. Generic likenesses among all dogs. This refers to the shared, fundamental features that make them recognizable as dogs, as a species or type, despite their individual breeds, sizes, or appearances.
And its opposite is specific.
Right, highlighting individuality or particularity.
Understanding these differences allows for incredible precision when you're talking about scope and application. Are you truly talking about everyone and everything? universal, or just most people, or the main idea in general? Are you speaking about a specific instance or a defining characteristic of an entire category, generic? Choosing the right word makes a huge difference in clarity and, frankly, the truthfulness of your statement.
Absolutely crucial,
Yeah.
especially in fields where precision is paramount.
That distinction between all, most, and characteristic is so important. Really clear. Now let's tackle another set of words that are frequently conflated. Those describing something not allowed. We often instinctively reach for illegal, but our sources provide a deeply nuanced view, showing there are different forms and contexts for what is not permitted. Unlawful, illegal, illegitimate, and illicit.
Yes, these terms are indeed often confused, but their distinctions are vital, especially in discussions about rules, regulations, societal norms, and of course, legal repercussions. Each points to a different source or type of prohibition.
Okay, let's start with unlawful. How's that different from illegal?
Unlawful implies lack of conformity with law of any sort, and this is the key, of any sort. It's the broadest term for actions contrary to law, and it's important to understand that law here can be quite expansive. This can refer to moral law, natural law, divine law, established principles, or any established rule, not just codified government statutes. It sets the baseline for what is not right by rule or principle, whether formal or informal.
So it's broader than just breaking a government law.
Much broader. The source states, unlawful conduct. This describes behavior that goes against established rules, principles, or ethical norms, whether they are explicitly written laws or broadly accepted societal standards. Its antonym is lawful, indicating compliance with any kind of law.
Okay, so illegal must be narrower then, tied to government law.
Exactly. Illegal, in contrast, often stresses lack of conformity to what is sanctioned by the law as defined by statute and administered by courts. This term is specifically and primarily tied to formal governmental laws and the legal system. It implies a legal consequence, a specific violation of a legislative act, or something prohibited by official legal code. It's about breaking a specific written law that carries a penalty in a court of law.
Like running a red light.
Or the example given, an illegal U-turn. This is an action directly prohibited by traffic laws and carries a specific legal penalty, like a fine or points on a license. Its antonym is legal, meaning permitted by governmental law.
Okay, unlawful is broad, any rule. Illegal is specific, statute law. What about illegitimate? That has a very specific historical meaning, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Illegitimate tends to be narrow in reference and usually applies to children born out of wedlock or a relation leading to such a result. That's its most common and historical usage. However, it may also refer to something that is not proper according to rules of logic or to established authorities or to precedent.
So it has a broader sense too,
Yeah.
like an improper argument.
Exactly. So this term has that primary specific meaning related to birth status, but it also extends to anything deemed improper, unauthorized, or unsupported by established rules, logic, or customary practice. It suggests a lack of proper foundation, authority, or justification, rather than necessarily breaking a specific statute. The dictionary offers both meanings, illustrating its dual nature. Their union was illegitimate, referring to a marriage or relationship not recognized as proper or valid by social or legal conventions of that era. Or an illegitimate inference, meaning a conclusion that is not logically supported by the premises, therefore improper in a logical argument.
And its antonym is legitimate.
Correct, indicating proper authorization, logical soundness, or lawful birth.
Okay. And the last one, illicit. This one often sounds a bit sneaky.
It often carries that connotation, yes. Illicit may imply lack of conformance with a regulatory law, but it is also applied more broadly to something obtained, done, or maintained unlawfully, illegally, or illegitimately. So it can overlap. But this term often carries a connotation of something forbidden, especially due to morality, impropriety, or secrecy.
The secrecy aspect.
Yes. While it can overlap with illegal, illicit often emphasizes the forbidden or unauthorized nature of an activity, particularly those involving some degree of secrecy, impropriety, or moral transgression. It often has a sense of being under the table or morally questionable, even if not strictly illegal by statute.
Right.
The source gives vivid examples like illicit distilling, which is making alcohol without proper permits, often secretly and against regulations.
Right.
And an illicit affair, which describes a relationship that is morally or socially forbidden and kept secret, often implying impropriety rather than a specific legal violation.
And its antonym.
Licit, meaning permitted or lawful.
Wow. This section truly highlights that not all forbidden acts are created equal, doesn't it? Choosing the right word can change the entire ethical, moral, or legal perception and the social weight of your statement. Are you talking about something against a general principle? Unlawful? A specific statutory law? Illegal? Lacking proper authority or foundation? Illegitimate? Or something secretly forbidden and morally improper to illicit? The distinctions are significant.
They really are. Knowing them empowers your critique and your understanding.
That's a masterclass in the legal and ethical nuances of prohibition. Really important distinctions. Now let's turn our attention to words that describe various ways someone or something can be weakened or deprived of vigor. These are not just synonyms. They speak to different kinds of diminishment, from a momentary loss of nerve to a deep, fundamental stripping of power. Unnerve, enervate, unman, and emasculate.
Yes, these terms describe distinct types of weakening. They range from a temporary emotional shock to a profound, fundamental loss of power, vigor, or essence. Each has a specific focus on what is being weakened and how.
Let's start with unnerve. What does that capture?
Unnerve implies a marked, often temporary loss of courage, self-control, or power to act. This is typically about a sudden, unsettling blow to one's composure, resolve, or mental fortitude.
So it's sudden and often temporary, like a shock.
Exactly. It's often a psychological impact, making someone feel agitated, anxious, or momentarily unable to function as usual. But it generally implies a temporary state rather than a permanent debilitation. The source provides the clear example: unnerved by the near mid-air collision. A sudden shock that makes one lose composure and feel unable to act effectively, perhaps shaky or momentarily frozen. It's about shaking one's nerve.
Okay. How is enervate different? It sounds similar.
It does sound similar, but the process is very different. Enervate suggests a gradual physical or moral weakening through debilitating influences such as climate, disease, luxury, or indolence until one is too feeble to make an effort.
So it's slow and draining, not sudden.
Precisely. This implies a slow, insidious drain of energy, vitality, or moral fiber, leading to a state of profound exhaustion, lethargy, or loss of drive and spirit. It's a more systemic and prolonged weakening, often due to external factors that slowly wear a person down over time, rather than a sudden shock.
The example seems odd, though. Totally enervated after a week's vacation.
It might seem counterintuitive, yeah, but it suggests perhaps a vacation of such excessive luxury or maybe indolence or even overexertion in a different way that it leaves one weak and sapped of energy rather than refreshed. It's about being drained of vigor over time.
And its antonyms point to toughening up.
They do. Harden and inure, both suggesting the strengthening or toughening of one's constitution.
Okay, now unman. This one sounds dated and potentially problematic.
It does carry historical baggage tied to gender stereotypes, absolutely. Unman implies a loss of manly vigor, fortitude, or spirit. Historically, and largely in its current usage, this term often referred to a loss of courage, emotional control, or resilience, especially in a way traditionally associated with masculinity or stoicism. It suggests a weakening that is particularly jarring because it goes against an expected strength, composure, or emotional control.
So it's about losing manly qualities.
Traditionally, yes. The source gives a classic example. The sight of blood usually unmanned him. This indicates a loss of composure, a weakening of resolve, or a collapse of strength when confronted with something traditionally expected to be met with fortitude. It speaks to a profound emotional or psychological weakening, often a breaking of spirit, framed through that historical lens.
Okay, and the last one, emasculate. This sounds even stronger.
It is arguably the strongest term among these. Emasculate stresses a depriving of characteristic force by removing something essential. This implies that a core defining power, effectiveness, or essence has been stripped away. It's about rendering something impotent, fundamentally weak, or ineffective by removing its vital, crucial component.
So it's about removing the core power.
Exactly. It can be literal in a biological sense, but it is very frequently used metaphorically. Like in the dictionary's powerful example, an amendment that emasculates existing gun control laws. This means the amendment takes away the fundamental power, the teeth, the effectiveness of those laws, rendering them toothless and unable to achieve their intended purpose. It's complete disempowerment.
So whether it's a momentary shock that makes you hesitate, or a slow, insidious drain of energy or morale, or a collapse of courage or composure framed traditionally under unman, or a deep, fundamental weakening by stripping away essential power, emasculate. The right word truly captures the severity, the nature, and the target of the loss. That level of precision changes how we understand the very act of weakening.
It really does. The nuances are critical.
That's a stark reminder of the power dynamics inherent in our language. Really clear distinctions there. Now, this next cluster of words is fantastic for anyone trying to describe resistance, whether it's a child, an animal, or even an entire population. Our sources provide a nuanced gradient of non-submission, ranging from mere difficulty in managing to deep-seated defiance. Unruly, ungovernable, intractable, refractory, recalcitrant, willful, and headstrong. Quite a collection.
It is. This group helps us differentiate between simple disobedience, inherent difficulty in control, and deep-seated active defiance. Each carries different implications for management, persuasion, or resolution.
Let's start with the most common one, perhaps. Unruly.
Okay. Unruly implies unwillingness to submit to discipline or incapacity for discipline, and often connotes waywardness or turbulence of disposition. This is often applied to individuals or groups that are difficult to manage due to their boisterousness, maybe disorganization, lack of self-control, or just a general lack of respect for order or guidance. They might not be actively malicious, but they are hard to keep in line.
Like kids running wild.
The classic example, as our source provides, unruly children. They're energetic and difficult to control, perhaps noisy or disobedient, but not necessarily malicious in their resistance. Its antonyms are tractable and docile, indicating ease of management.
Okay. Then ungovernable. That sounds much more extreme.
It is. Ungovernable means not susceptible to control or guidance by oneself or others, or a state of being unsubdued. This implies an extreme form of lack of control, often beyond the capacity of external influence or even self-control. It can describe intense emotions, a situation, or a group that simply cannot be contained, managed, or brought under any kind of authority.
Like pure chaos.
Almost. The source provides a powerful illustration: ungovernable rage. This is rage so powerful and overwhelming that it cannot be controlled by the person experiencing it, nor can external attempts calm it. It's beyond management. Its antonyms are governable and docile, highlighting capacity for control.
Right. Next is intractable. What does that focus on?
Intractable suggests stubborn resistance to guidance or control. This term highlights a deep-seated, often unyielding unwillingness to yield, often due to sheer obstinacy, maybe a fixed position, or just an inherent difficulty in being worked with. It suggests a challenge that is very difficult to overcome through persuasion, force, or even time, because the subject is firmly set in its resistance.
Really dug in their heels.
Exactly. The example given is quite illustrative. The farmers were intractable in their opposition to the hazardous waste dump. They were unyielding, deeply resistant, and very difficult to sway from their firm stance, perhaps due to deeply held beliefs or practical concerns. Its antonym is tractable, meaning easily managed or imbalanced.
Okay. How about refractory?
Refractory stresses persistent resistance to attempts to manage or to mold. This often applies to things that are difficult to process or shape, whether literally, like certain materials that resist being worked.
Or metaphorically.
Right, like children who persistently resist teaching or influence. It implies a consistent and often problematic resistance to external influence, shaping, or correction. The source uses it for a difficult learning situation. Special schools for refractory children. These are children who consistently resist being taught, disciplined, or influenced despite repeated efforts.
And its antonyms suggest being easy to shape.
Yes, malleable and amenable, suggesting pliability and willingness to cooperate.
Okay. Now, recalcitrant. This sounds like active defiance.
It absolutely is. Recalcitrant suggests determined resistance to or rebellious and deliberate defiance of the will or authority of another. This is a strong term for active, willful, and often rebellious defiance. It implies a conscious choice to resist authority, often with an element of insubordination or open rebellion. It's a deliberate act of non-compliance, where the resistance is intentional and often provocative.
Like sabotage.
The dictionary offers that vivid example: acts of sabotage by a recalcitrant populace. This describes a population actively and intentionally defying authority through disruptive and insubordinate actions. Its antonym is amenable, indicating openness to influence or persuasion.
Right. Two more related to personal will. Willful and headstrong. How do they differ? Let's start with willful.
Willful implies an obstinate and often capricious determination to have one's own way. This emphasizes a personal characteristic of stubborn self-determination, often without regard for others' advice, warnings, or consequences. It's about an insistence on one's own desires, sometimes seemingly for no logical reason other than to assert one's will purely out of stubbornness.
Just because they want to.
Pretty much. The source's example, a willful disregard for the rights of others, highlights this deliberate and obstinate nature in ignoring the well-being and established rights of others, simply because one chooses to do so. Its antonym is biddable, meaning willing to obey or be guided.
Okay. And headstrong. How is that different from willful?
Headstrong suggests self-will that is impatient of restraint, advice, or suggestion. This term highlights a fiery, impulsive determination that rejects caution or guidance. It's often associated with impetuous actions driven by strong personal will where advice is impatiently brushed aside, often due to an intense desire to proceed with one's own plan.
More impulsive and impatient.
Yes, that's a good distinction. The example is quite vivid. A headstrong young army officer bent on engaging the enemy. This officer is determined to have their way, charging ahead with impetuous determination, convinced their way is the only way, regardless of what anyone else suggests. So both willful and headstrong relate to strong personal will, but willful often implies a stubborn refusal or disregard, while headstrong suggests an insistent, often impulsive pursuit despite warnings.
Wow. This whole cluster shows that not all resistance is the same, is it? Knowing these distinctions helps you accurately diagnose the challenge you're facing. Is it mere unruliness that can be managed with structure? An unyielding, intractable stance that needs careful negotiation? Active and deliberate recalcitrant defiance? Or a stubborn, willful, or headstrong self-will that rejects all counsel? Each calls for a completely different approach.
Precisely. Understanding the nature of the resistance is the first step to addressing it effectively.
That's a powerful tool for understanding human and even animal behavior. Really useful. Okay, this next set of terms is something we hear a lot, especially when discussing human behavior and social interaction. Our sources clear up common confusions about how we describe someone's relationship with society. Unsocial, asocial, antisocial, and non-social. These are frequently misused, aren't they? Leading to significant misunderstandings.
Oh, absolutely. These words are indeed frequently misused, yet their precise meanings are essential for understanding different forms of social engagement, disengagement, or even harm. Confusing them can lead to mislabeling individuals or behaviors with serious implications.
Let's start with unsocial. What does that really mean? Is it just being shy?
It can encompass shyness, but it's broader. Unsocial implies a distaste for the society of others, or an aversion to close association and interaction with others. This describes a personal preference for solitude, maybe a lack of inclination to engage in extensive social activities, or simply a reserved, introverted temperament. Crucially, it's about individual preference or disposition, not necessarily harmful or indicative of a problem.
So someone who just prefers staying home.
Exactly. An unsocial person might prefer quiet evenings at home to large parties. The dictionary gives the example of very unsocial temperament. This person simply prefers their own company or quiet, solitary pursuits and finds extensive socializing draining. Its antonym is social, indicating a preference for companionship.
Okay, now asocial. How is that different from unsocial?
This is a key distinction often missed. Asocial applies more often to behavior, thoughts, or acts viewed objectively, and implies a lack of all the qualities conveyed by the word social, and rather stresses a self-centered, individualistic, egocentric orientation.
So it's not just preferring to be alone, it's lacking social awareness.
That's a good way to put it. This refers to behavior that operates outside of social norms, considerations, or reciprocity. It's not necessarily against them, like antisocial, but simply without regard for them. It describes someone who is self-absorbed and lacks an understanding or consideration of social conventions, acting purely from self-interest without acknowledging or valuing others' perspectives or feelings.
Can you give an example?
The source provides a surprising yet illuminating one. Dreaming is an asocial act. This illustrates how an act can occur entirely within one's own sphere, without any social interaction, consideration, or impact on others. It highlights a lack of social connection or awareness in that specific act. Its antonym is social, implying an awareness and participation in communal life.
Right. Then we get to antisocial. This is the one often used incorrectly, right?
Yeah.
But it means harmful.
Exactly. It's often misused for someone who's merely unsocial, but antisocial, correctly used, applies to things such as acts, ideas, or movements that are felt as harmful to or destructive of society or the social order or institutions. This is the term for behavior that is actively detrimental, hostile, or harmful to society or its members. It implies a conscious disregard for the well-being of others, a violation of social norms, or an intent to harm, disrupt, or exploit.
So there's intent to harm or disrupt.
Yes, or at least a reckless disregard for social welfare. This is where that intent is present. The dictionary clearly states, tried to discourage antisocial behavior among her students. This refers to actions like bullying, vandalism, lying, or disruptive behavior that actively undermine the social environment, cause distress, or break down trust within a community. Its antonym is social, implying behavior that fosters community and positive
Okay,
interaction.
that's clear. Unsocial is preference. Asocial is lack of regard. Antisocial is harmful. What's non-social then?
Non-social applies to what cannot be described as social in any relevant sense. This is typically used for things that simply don't have social characteristics because they are not sentient beings or concepts capable of social interaction.
Like rocks. Or maybe mass.
Rocks, math problems, yeah. It's a neutral descriptor for non-living things, abstract concepts, or certain non-colony forming animal species that don't participate in social dynamics. It indicates an absence of social attributes. An excellent example provided is non-social bees, referring to bee species that do not live in colonies or exhibit social behaviors, unlike social bees like honeybees. They simply don't possess the characteristic of living socially. It's outside their very nature.
So you can be unsocial and just prefer alone time, perhaps enjoying your solitude. But antisocial implies a much more harmful, disruptive, or even predatory interaction with the world. And asocial means operating without social regard, while non-social is for things that simply aren't capable of being social. Precision really matters here when you're talking about someone's relationship to others, and society at large confusing these can lead to serious misjudgments.
Couldn't agree more. It's a critical distinction.
That brings a critical clarity to how we categorize behaviors. Really important. Now here's a wonderful collection of words. Words that describe integrity and moral rectitude. They all sound positive, even admirable, but our sources show how each emphasizes a distinct, nuanced aspect of what it means to be truly good and upright. Upright, honest, just, conscientious, scrupulous, and honorable.
Yes, this group provides such a rich, multifaceted vocabulary for describing various dimensions of strong moral character, from general adherence to principles to meticulous attention to the finest ethical details. Each word illuminates a different facet of rectitude.
Let's start with upright. What's its core meaning?
Upright implies a strict, unwavering adherence to moral principles. This is a foundational term, suggesting a consistently principled and morally sound character that stands firm and true. It's about living by strong moral convictions with unwavering rectitude, often implying integrity and probity.
Solidly principled.
Exactly. The source states, ministers of the church must be upright and unimpeachable. This suggests they must live by such strong moral principles that their character and actions cannot be questioned or found fault with. It's about a consistent moral stance.
Okay. How does honest differ? It seems related.
It is related, but more specific. Honest stresses recognition of and adherence to such virtues as truthfulness, candor, and fairness. This focuses specifically on sincerity, straightforwardness, and transparency, particularly in communication, dealings, and maybe financial matters. It's about being truthful, avoiding deceit, and being fair in one's interactions.
So primarily about truth and fairness in dealing with others.
Yes, the dictionary's example is vital and impactful. Doctors must be honest with the terminally ill. This highlights the profound importance of truthfulness and candor, even in difficult, sensitive situations, without sugarcoating or misleading. Its antonym is dishonest, directly implying deceit or fraud.
Right, now just. This sounds like fairness too, but maybe more active.
Exactly. Just stresses a conscious choice and regular practice of what is right or equitable, particularly in judgment and action. This implies an active commitment to fairness, impartiality, and rectitude, especially in dispensing justice, making decisions, or treating others. It's about ensuring that outcomes are fair, balanced, and righteous, often in a judicial, ethical, or administrative sense.
Like a judge.
Or anyone in a position to make fair decisions. The source gives a reputation for being entirely just in business dealings. This person consistently makes fair, equitable, and impartial decisions, ensuring that all parties are treated appropriately. It speaks to fairness in application.
Okay, then conscientious. This links to conscience, obviously.
Because conscientious implies an active moral sense governing all one's actions and stresses painstaking efforts to follow one's conscience. This highlights a diligent, thorough, and meticulous approach to doing what is right, driven by an internal moral compass. It's about thoroughness and care in moral execution, ensuring that one's actions align perfectly with their inner sense of right and duty.
So it's about careful effort driven by inner morality.
Yes. The example provided is simple yet powerful in its implication. Quote, conscientious in doing all of her chores. It suggests a careful, diligent approach rooted in a strong sense of responsibility and moral obligation. Doing things correctly because it's the right thing to do, not just to avoid punishment. Its antonyms are unconscientious and conscienceless, both implying a lack of moral concern.
Right. Now, scrupulous, how does that compare to conscientious? Sounds even more careful.
It is. Scrupulous, like conscientious, connotes the action of a moral sense in all one's doings, but distinctively it stresses meticulous attention to details of morality or conduct. This takes conscientious a significant step further. It emphasizes an extreme carefulness about avoiding moral impropriety, even in minute details or obscure circumstances. It implies a high degree of ethical exactitude and precision, a powerful reluctance to do anything that might be even slightly wrong or ethically questionable.
Paying attention to every little ethical point?
Exactly. The dictionary example, scrupulous in carrying out the terms of the will, emphasizes this meticulous adherence to every ethical and legal detail, leaving no room for error or moral compromise. Its antonym is unscrupulous, implying a complete lack of moral principles.
Okay. And finally, honorable. This feels connected to reputation.
It often is. Honorable suggests a firm holding to codes of right behavior and the guidance of a high sense of honor and duty. This implies adherence to a formal or informal code of conduct that brings dignity, self-respect, and external respect. It's about living up to a personal or societal standard of integrity, often associated with a sense of personal pride in one's moral standing and a deep commitment to duty. It's about preserving one's reputation through virtuous conduct.
Like doing the right thing according to a code.
Precisely. The source offers a powerful ethical dilemma. The honorable thing would be to resign my position. This implies that despite personal cost or difficulty, upholding a code of honor or duty demands such a self-sacrificing action. Its antonym is dishonorable, implying a loss of reputation or integrity.
Wow. This section is truly a masterclass in describing character. Each word adds a distinct, precise layer to what it means to be morally exemplary. Are you describing a general adherence to principles upright, unwavering truthfulness in interactions, honest, a consistent commitment to fairness, just, painstaking diligence driven by conscience, conscientious, meticulous ethical exactitude, even in the smallest details, scrupulous, or adherence to a high code of honor and duty, honorable?
Knowing these distinctions allows for unparalleled insight into the moral fabric of an individual. It's incredibly nuanced.
That's a deep dive into character indeed. Really valuable. Now, let's pivot to something we all do constantly. We use the word use all the time, right? But our sources reveal there are so many more precise ways to describe the purpose, value, and application of things. Let's dive into these practical distinctions, first examining the nouns related to use and then the verbs that describe the act of using.
Yes, these terms help us be remarkably precise about the function, the value, and the active engagement with objects, resources, or even abstract concepts like time. They move us beyond simple action to intention and efficiency.
Okay, let's start with the nouns. First, just use as a noun.
Right. Use, the noun, implies little more than suitability for employment for some purpose, specified or implied. It's the most basic, fundamental concept of purpose or functionality. It simply means it can be employed, that it has a basic, inherent purpose or utility, whether or not that purpose is currently being actualized.
Just that it could be used.
Essentially, the source offers a very relatable scenario. She hated to throw away anything that might have some use. This highlights the inherent potential for function, no matter how small or distant that function might be.
Okay, how is usefulness different?
Usefulness is employed chiefly with reference to definite, concrete things that serve or are capable of serving a practical purpose. This term emphasizes the practical, tangible benefit something provides. It's about its efficacy in solving a real-world problem or fulfilling a specific practical need. It's about demonstrated utility that delivers results.
So it's about practical benefit.
Yes, the example is clear. Demonstrated the usefulness of the gadget. This means its practical application was proven, its ability to effectively serve a purpose was evident. Its antonym is uselessness, implying a lack of practical benefit.
Right, and utility. That sounds more technical or abstract.
It often is. Utility may differ from usefulness, especially in technical use, by implying a measurable property or one that can be viewed as an abstraction. This term often implies a more abstract, theoretical, or quantifiable value. frequently used in economic, scientific, or technical contexts. It's the inherent capacity to satisfy a need or provide satisfaction, possibly in a theoretical or statistical sense, rather than necessarily a direct, tangible benefit in every instance. It speaks to inherent value or effectiveness within a system.
Like in economics.
Exactly. The dictionary's example is quite insightful and a common point of discussion. A college major of no immediate utility. This refers to its abstract value or practical applicability in the immediate job market, not its immediate tangible benefit or personal enrichment. It emphasizes general applicability or functional worth.
Okay, got the nouns. Use, potential, usefulness, practical benefit, utility, abstract, measurable value. Now for the verbs. Use, employ, utilize, and apply. Let's start with use.
Okay. Use, as a verb, implies availing oneself of something as a means or in relation to an end. It's the most general and common verb in this group. It describes the straightforward act of interacting with something to achieve a goal, without much emphasis on efficiency, ingenuity, or the state of the item being used.
Just doing something with it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
For example, willing to use any means to achieve her ends. It's a very broad term for engaging with something for a purpose, any purpose.
Right. How is employ different? Often used for people, but for things too.
Yes, for things too. Employ suggests the using of a person or thing that is available but idle, inactive, or disengaged by putting him, her, or it to some work or profitable activity. This verb implies putting something or someone that could be dormant or idle into productive action. It has a connotation of actively engaging a resource that was previously dormant or underutilized, making it productive.
Putting something idle to work.
Exactly. The source uses it thoughtfully, highlighting its active engagement of resources. Your time might have been better employed by reading. This suggests that idle time, a valuable resource, could have been put to a more profitable or enriching activity.
Okay. Then utilize sounds more strategic.
It often is. Utilize may suggest the discovery of a new, profitable, or practical use for something that might be overlooked or wasted. This is often the most strategic, resourceful, and perhaps ingenious verb among these. It implies finding creative, optimal, or innovative ways to leverage something, especially if its potential wasn't immediately obvious or if it was considered a waste product. It's about making the absolute most of what's available through innovative or efficient application.
Making the best possible use.
Yes. The dictionary's example perfectly illustrates this resourceful maximization. Meat processors utilize every part of the animal. This means they find a use for what might otherwise be discarded, maximizing its value and minimizing waste. It speaks to making the best possible use.
Great example. Lastly, apply. How does that fit in?
Apply stresses the bringing of one thing into contact or relation with something else in such a way that it proves useful or acquires practical value. This term is distinct in that it's about making a specific, direct connection.
A connection between
A rule, principle, tool, or theory, and a particular situation or problem. It's about practical implementation and relevance, taking something conceptual or general and making it work in a specific context. It's about making something relevant and effective in a given circumstance.
Like applying a rule to a case.
Exactly. The source example shows this direct connection. Applied specific rules to the situation. This indicates the act of taking existing rules or principles and putting them directly into effect in a given circumstance or problem, demonstrating their practical relevance.
Whether you're talking about the general function of a tool, putting something idle to work, the strategic deployment of a resource, utilize, or the specific implementation of a rule, apply. These words offer different levels of nuance and intention.
They really do.
It's about choosing precisely how you engage with things, from a broad active using to a resourceful utilization or a targeted practical application. Your choice of verb can speak volumes about your intention and ingenuity.
Very well put.
That illuminates the strategic side of simple use.
Fascinating. Now, we all have routines, things we do repeatedly, consciously or unconsciously. But how do we describe those regular occurrences with precision? Our sources provide a beautiful array of words, each with a slightly different flavor of frequency, expectation, and personal or communal practice. Usual, customary, habitual, wanted, and accustomed.
Yes, these terms help us distinguish between what is merely common, what is culturally ingrained, what is a personal pattern, and what is a cherished regularity. They reflect different degrees of repetition and the source of that repetition.
Okay, let's start with the most common, usual. Right. Usual stresses the absence of strangeness or unexpectedness and is applicable to whatever is normal, common, or expected within a given context. This is the most general term for what happens frequently enough not to be surprising, a typical occurrence. It implies regularity without necessarily specifying its origin or significance.
Just what normally happens.
Exactly. The dictionary gives my usual order for lunch. This indicates the order that is regularly placed, so it's not out of the ordinary. It's simply what is commonly done. Its antonym is unusual, emphasizing deviation from the norm.
Okay. How is customary different? That sounds more formal or traditional.
It often is. Customary applies to what accords with the practices, conventions, or usages of an individual or, more often, a community. This implies adherence to an established tradition, a social convention, or a widely accepted personal routine. It carries a sense of what is done or accepted within a specific cultural, social, or organizational framework. It often suggests a practice that has historical depth or communal endorsement.
Like a tradition.
Yes. The source's example is a customary waiting period before remarrying. This is a practice that is widely accepted or even mandated within a community or a legal system, a widely followed tradition. Its antonym is occasional, referring to something that happens infrequently.
Got it. Usual is just normal. Customary is based on convention. What about habitual?
Habitual suggests a practice settled or established by much repetition, becoming almost automatic. This refers to an action that has become a regular, almost unconscious part of a person's behavior due to frequent repetition. It implies a pattern that is deeply ingrained, often performed without much conscious thought, almost by second nature.
Like a habit you don't think about.
Precisely. The example provided is an habitual exercise regime that served her well. This regime is not just a one-off, but a deeply established pattern of behavior that has become a regular fixture in her life, a deeply ingrained routine. Its antonym is also occasional, indicating a lack of consistent pattern.
Okay. Now, wanted, another slightly older sounding word.
Yes, like ill-favored. It has that feel. Wanted stresses habituation, but usually applies to what is favored, sought, or purposefully cultivated. This term often evokes a sense of fond familiarity, a personal inclination, or something that is regularly indulged in because it's a preference, a cherished activity, or a chosen part of one's routine. It's a cultivated, perhaps even beloved routine, rather than just something that happens frequently.
It's a habit you like or choose.
Often, yes. The dictionary's example beautifully conveys this personal, cherished aspect. His wanted pleasures had lost their appeal. These were the specific, favored activities he regularly engaged in for enjoyment, indicating a strong personal connection to the habit. Its antonym is unwanted, meaning not usual or customary.
Okay. And the last one, accustomed. How does that fit in?
Accustomed is less emphatic than wanted or habitual in suggesting fixed habit or invariable custom. This implies familiarity through repeated exposure or experience, leading to adaptation, comfort, or expectation. It's about being used to something, having grown familiar with it, often resulting in a natural or comfortable reaction, but without necessarily being a deep-seated, unbreakable habit. It's more about being familiarized than intrinsically driven.
Just used to it.
That's a good summary. The source says, accepted the compliment with her accustomed modesty. This suggests that modesty is a familiar, often displayed trait, a characteristic way she reacts due to frequent practice or personal comfort with it, but not necessarily an unyielding habit or cherished ritual. Its antonym is unaccustomed, meaning not used to something.
So next time you describe a routine, you should consider the nuance.
Yeah.
Is it just usual, simply common, and expected? Or is it customary, within a community or culture carrying social weight? Is it a deeply habitual personal practice, almost automatic? Or perhaps a favored, personally cultivated, wanted pleasure, or just something you're accustomed to?
The choice of word paints a richer, more accurate picture of the rhythm and meaning behind the repetition.
That's a truly detailed exploration of our daily rhythms. Very insightful. Finally, we conclude our deep dive today with a single powerful word, a word that speaks to futility, emptiness, and a lack of meaning or worth. Vain. It's a word that can cut through pretense, can't it?
It really can. The word vain encapsulates a profound sense of emptiness, pointlessness, or unachievability. Understanding its implications can be quite insightful for assessing endeavors and intentions.
What's its core meaning?
Vain implies either absolute or relative absence of value or worth. This term describes something that is futile, ineffectual, unproductive, or achieves nothing, despite effort or intention. It can imply a complete lack of success or purpose, highlighting the inherent meaninglessness of certain actions or thoughts. It suggests that an endeavor is ultimately fruitless or pointless. It speaks to efforts that are without a real or beneficial result.
Like trying to do the impossible.
Exactly. The source provides a classic example that underscores its meaning of futility. It is vain to think that we can alter destiny. This emphasizes the complete futility and worthlessness of such an endeavor in terms of achieving its intended outcome. It suggests it's a pointless exercise because the outcome is predetermined or impossible. It's about being devoid of success or purpose.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that not all efforts yield fruit. Recognizing when something is truly vain can save us from chasing after empty pursuits, helping us prioritize our energy and focus on what truly matters.
A powerful, if sometimes sobering, insight.
And that concludes our deep dive into the fascinating world of linguistic precision. We've journeyed through the nuanced distinctions between words that might seem interchangeable at first glance, from, well, subtle shades of ugly, all the way to the profound implications of vain.
Our goal, really, was to provide you with a shortcut to being well-informed. Not just about definitions, but about the power these distinctions hold. This isn't just about sounding smarter, though that might be a side effect. It's truly about thinking more clearly, communicating more effectively, and grasping the depth of meaning in every sentence you encounter. It transforms your engagement with language itself.
So what stands out to you from today's deep dive as you go about your day? Maybe trying to notice where you might have used a general word when a more precise synonym from our discussion could have painted a far clearer, more impactful picture. Could your uncertainty actually be skepticism? Or maybe even a paralyzing doubt? Is something truly ugly, evoking repulsion, or merely unsightly, just a minor visual annoyance?
Pay attention to how these words are used around you, in conversations, in news reports, and books. You'll start to see the world and the way people describe it with newfound clarity and insight. It's a wonderful way to continue this deep dive on your own, sharpening your own linguistic toolkit.
We hope this has given you plenty to think about and maybe to explore further. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep digging for those insights.